Hello everybody, welcome back to the main edition of the Talking City podcast. We're here on Monday, we're discussing the transfer window, discussing the absolutely exemplary Oscar Bobb, and we're discussing the Fulham result at the weekend, and that's it. It's the international break now. City have had a fantastic start to the season, a fantastic transfer window in my opinion as well, and I'm joined by your Manchester City writer, Joe Bray. Joe, how you doing, mate?
Not too bad, yeah. I'm all right now. It's the start of the international break. That's me at the weekend when there's nothing to do, nothing to write about, so it might be a bit different.
Yeah, that is the issue. It is the issue. It's the content, isn't it? The stimulus is a bit of an issue when there's just... But we were joking outside, weren't we? We were saying that every City player will be on international duty. So maybe the unusual...
Still got some sort of...
Yeah, which City players aren't on international duty will be the interesting read. But yeah, let's get straight into it, mate. So we're going to leave the Fulham chat to Act 2, so make sure you stick around for that one, everybody. But we're going to... I want sort of an overview, really, and discuss the transfer window that's just been. Obviously, the main income is Jeremy Doku, Mateo Kovacic, Gvardiol, and Matheus Nunes. Matheus Nunes being the latest addition. Overall, how are you feeling about the makeup of the squad at the minute? Are you sort of satisfied with it, or do you think more needed to be done? Or
It is a weird one, isn't it? Because in an ideal world, you don't lose Gundogan, you don't lose Mahrez, you keep Laporte around the squad. But City have replaced all those players like for like, and they look like all good signings. It's just, do they need a bit of time to get sort of up to speed? And the injury to Kevin De Bruyne complicates things a bit, but that might have allowed City to get in Matheus Nunes, for example. And I think it will need a bit of time to see if it is a successful window or not. But I mean, the early signs of those players that they brought in do look quite good. We've seen Gvardiol, he looks like he's only going to get better. Kovacic has slotted in like he's been playing for Pep Guardiola for 5-10 years. Doku looks okay when he came on and got a good review from Lillo in the dugout. So yeah, I think it's good. I think just the fact that they've lost so many players. Cole Palmer's gone as well, which was sort of a controversial one, if you like, in the fan base. It's not a perfect window, I don't think, but to say you've replaced 4 key players in key positions and you've done a net spend of about 50 million, that's pretty good.
Are you surprised that obviously Tommy Doyle, Cole Palmer, as we mentioned, McAtee as well? I mean, me and Si were talking about on the previous pod, it was almost like watch this space, because I think Pep was almost saying, and the noise from City was they wanted to keep them.
Yeah.
But I don't know, it always felt to me that there would have been movement there. And Cole Palmer's an interesting one, because I'm like you, Joe, like I've seen a bit of a mixed bag online. I think it's incredible business. Like, what was it, 42 million?
Yeah.
For a player who, yes, he'll feature, scored some important goals, excellent for obviously for England in the some months as well. But overall, it's got to be good business. I mean, I think every other football fan would turn around objectively and say, that's a lot of money for someone who's barely played really for Man City. So yeah, I think that's a decent move, to be honest.
It depends how you look at it, because you've got a player who's not playing, he's not going to play that much because you've just signed Jeremy Doku and you're getting 40 million for him. That's good business. But because you know the potential that he's got, we've seen him come through the academy, the type of goals he scores, we know he's not shown that as much for the first team. That's a reason to sell, but it's also a reason to want to keep him and see how it goes and see what he can do if given the chance. So I think that's why fans are disappointed, because we won't see him live up to his obvious potential in a City shirt.
So why not then? Why did that not happen, do you think? Why did City...
It's tricky, because when you're in his position, the only games he's getting are cup games where he's got to really make an impression in a team that's probably quite different to what he'd normally play in, or he's coming off the bench when a game's won and a team's just given up attacking and they're just putting men behind the ball. When he came on, he didn't often change a game because there wasn't a game to change. So I felt like every time he came on, I was thinking, right, go on, this is your chance. And he just wouldn't take a man on, he'd stop and he'd play back, maybe doing what Guardiola was asking him to do. But he didn't get those goals and assists. And when he actually sort of got off the lead a bit, after the league was won, he got a couple of starts, he looked really good. But then he goes back to it this season, and Mahrez has gone, but Doku's arrived, and Kyle Walker's playing on the wing, and Bernardo, and he's just not going to get those chances. So I can see why he would look at the situation and think, I'm not getting games, I'm going to go, I want to play somewhere else, especially when they signed Doku, because he scores that goal in the Super Cup and basically says to the manager, if you sign someone to replace De Bruyne or to replace Mahrez, I'm gone. And Guardiola turns around and said, well, kind of go on then, because he said he's not going to go out on loan, it'll only be permanent. You can understand it from City's point of view, from Parma's point of view, and 40 million, like you say, is very good. But then you think, why has he gone to Chelsea?
I was thinking that, yeah.
Because it's exactly the same.
An abundance of wingers.
He's not got an easier route to the first team. So it'll be really interesting to see what happens there. The only thing I would say about Chelsea is he got on really well with Raheem Sterling when he was at City. I remember speaking to him, I think he scored a really good goal in the derby against United in the under-21s. And we spoke to him and he said, yeah, Sterling told him he was going to score a wonder goal. And Sterling was always the first one to say, how did he get on in the sort of EDS, and push him along and welcome him into the first team. So if he's looking at that thinking, that's the best football I played for City, with the help of Sterling, he knows the likes of Colwill and Madueke and people like that from the England setup could help him. But I think he's now got to go and prove himself and show that he is good enough for Chelsea, and show that City were wrong to accept that fee for him.
Yeah, I mean, Mahrez-wise, very similar profile. Because obviously we know Doku's come in, but completely different. Doku reminds me a lot of Sterling in terms of the profile, how quick he is off the turn, sharp, incisive in those moments. But a lot of his game's built on pace, isn't it? Whereas Parma did replicate a bit of those Mahrez attributes. That's why I thought maybe there's going to be a little bit of a pathway in for him this season if he keeps plugging away. And there's probably an argument to say he'd maybe have got more minutes in comparison to what he will do at Chelsea, really.
Possibly, and like you say, with Mahrez leaving, that does open up a space on that right wing. I think he would argue that right wing isn't necessarily his best position. He was always best possibly on the left, coming inside or in the centre and sort of roaming around, and he's just not going to get that game time at City. So if he wants to play games now, his best option is to leave. So it is a tricky one. I think it's going to be one that, again, like the transfer window, will only show if it's a good move or not for all parties, to see how it happens in a year or two time. Because if Parma goes and smashes it at Chelsea, then they'll be very happy that they've got an England under-21 international who's clearly got a lot of talent for 40 million. I think Chelsea are happy with that fee as well. So it's just I just didn't expect it. I think that's part of the reason why City fans are also a little bit unsure about it, because it's sort of come out of the blue. They finally see him, he scored in the Community Shield, he scored in the Super Cup, and now suddenly he's gone. And it's sort of one of their own who's come through the academy. He's been in the away end with them, with the fans when he's not been playing, and now he's just gone. And it's a shame, but it will be very interesting to see how he does and if he proves City wrong.
Taylor Howard-Bellis, Tommy Doyle, James McAtee, any of that surprise you at all?
Doyle and Howard-Bellis, no, because they weren't involved in the pre-season. They weren't involved in any of the squads, in sort of not even in the pictures we've seen of first team training. So it seems like they were always lined up for a move away. The surprise is that no one's bought them. I mean, you look at Tommy Doyle and what he's done, not only for Sheffield United but Cardiff before that. He's a very capable top level championship midfielder. He's now got his chance in the Premier League, but I would have thought someone would have taken that chance earlier. And I mean, for Wolves to get a loan with an option to buy for 5 million, that's very good value for a player like Tommy Doyle. And we've seen sort of if the equivalent is someone like Romeo Lavia, who went for 10 million and now he's a 60 million player. Wolves can probably make a lot of money on Doyle if he continues what he's been doing last year. And everyone looked at McAtee as the big star of that Sheffield United team. Doyle was just as good, if not better. So I think that's going to be probably one of the better signings of the summer, to get Tommy Doyle for Wolves, especially if Wolves have just lost Mateus Nunes. And Howard-Bellis, he's gone on loan, top end of the Championship again, and it'll be a bit like Burnley last year. They expect to get promoted, and he's a European Championship winning for the under-21s captain, and he's won the Championship with Burnley. Why no one wanted to pay 15 million for him, again, with the sell-on values that you see for these City players? That's a bit of a surprise. And then McAtee's backed himself again, second year running. City wanted to keep him, and he said, no, let me go out and prove myself. And he's managed to convince City that Sheffield United are the right club again. So, I mean, when we went to Sheffield United the other week, he was welcomed back as a hero, and that, I don't know whether that changed his mind, but he'll have got that message from the fans to be like, we want you back, and he'll get games there, and they look good against City, they look good against Everton, and that'll be another player who's earned his step up into the Premier League.
They're only going to make money on them as well, aren't they? If you think it was like Taylor Howard-Bellis, for an example, has played top end with Burnley. And obviously he's been loaned out to Southampton again, but it's like there's a likelihood they're going to be top 2 again. So City is a win-win, isn't it? Because the valuation on him is just going to increase, and the sell-on clauses, yeah. So moving on to incomings, we've spoken a little bit about Jeremy Doku. Very exciting, bums off seats sort of thing. As I say, similar to Sterling in a lot of ways. It's an exciting one, that one. I think it's because there's Guardiola-esque players, but he feels a little bit out of that mould, doesn't he?
And he's an unknown. I think I don't think anyone at the start of the summer was saying go out and sign Jeremy Doku, but then you look at him and you look at his clips and his statistics that he carries the ball forward and he makes a lot of chances. And I think you called it earlier that it's going to be a bit more like the Sterling style winger. City have settled on Bernardo as a right winger in the big games for that control, and I feel like Kovacic will have the control in the middle, and Alvarez and Foden look like they're going to be playing more in the centre. So Bernardo makes sense as a right winger who can come inside. Walker can provide that width. In other games, Doku looks like he can be a different option, and that's always something that I think Guardiola likes, having not just players who are like-for-like replacements for each other, but can offer something different. And it's interesting that at the weekend, Grealish was injured. He's picked up an injury, and I think Doku started on the right, I believe, and changed to the left or the other way around, but that clearly shows he can play on both sides. That's also good for Grealish because, yes, Grealish can play a lot of games in a season and keep that left wing position, but he also needs time to rest. And if City are going to be aiming for the treble, the quadruple this season, they're going to need all the players, and you can't rely on Grealish to play 70 games, and you can't rely on Bernardo to do the same, and Foden will need to play on both wings, so having just that other option in Doku could be quite a good signing.
Yeah, it's that versatility with a lot of the new signings as well, isn't it? It's like Kovacic can play 6, can play at the 8, Gvardiol, left back, left centre back, Núñez can play anywhere in the midfield, can play on the left or the right, 8, 6, whatever. And Doku, if you can play on the left and the right, again, it's definitely a tick box for Pep, isn't it? It's like, if you're isolated to just one position, he's either going to develop you as a player, or he's just not going to be interested, it feels. You need to have so many different, parts to you, don't you? But Núñez, interesting one. The latest edition, we've been speaking off air, and I think we were a little bit... It's one of those where you didn't really expect it, probably similar to Cole Palmer in terms of outgoings, but you didn't really expect it. But I guess Pep loved him after they played Sport in Lisbon, didn't he? Absolutely loved him, said he's one of the best midfielders he'd seen, paraphrasing there, of course, but he was very impressed by him. Maybe he's going to ease the load on Rodri in terms of energy in that midfield. Maybe if Kovacic can drop back at some points, and that's what you were just speaking about with regards to Grealish, wasn't it? In terms of just giving some of these main players rest. Núñez and Gvardiol as a two, are you happy with those additions? Do you think they'll progress under Pep?
I think Gvardiol will. Not to say Núñez won't, but I think what we've seen from Gvardiol, because he's played a couple of times, I know fans are quite excited about what they've seen. I've not been fully convinced yet, but the fact that he's just done okay out of position, he said he's not played left back for 3 years. The fact that he's done that and he's stepping forward into midfield and looking to make those right passes is encouraging. And Nathan Ake came back at the weekend and Gvardiol was on the bench, but I get the feeling when it clicks for him, it can work. And City signed him and said he's a player for the next 10 years. So if it doesn't quite work this year, they're not going to give up. He's going to be a player, and you can see the quality there already. This is it. Yeah, he's a long-term signing and already looks to be fitting in, and you can see the signs of the training groundwork. And when Guardiola returns, that's just going to help him even more, isn't it? And Núñez is one where I don't know whether De Bruyne's injury sort of pushed that midfield signing, or they just looked at the midfield. I know last year they drew at Newcastle, and then Guardiola said, no, we need another defender, and everyone said, no, you don't, because you've got enough. And then Akanji comes in and transforms that defence, and maybe you can have that sort of effect where no one's expecting it. It's not the most exciting signing, but you can actually come in and make a real impact. And just by making other players raise the game and shifting them around a bit, and like say, yeah, Rodri can't play all the minutes that he did last season. Guardiola said that we know how important Rodri is, but if there's not a good enough backup to Rodri, Guardiola's going to keep playing him, and clearly Calvin Phillips hasn't done that yet, and he might do, he might not, but they want another midfielder in there. Kovacic can play deeper if he needs to. They can play a sort of a double pivot, but yeah, it just gives them a few more options. I think Núñez is going to be one where, I don't want to keep saying it, but it's going to be, we're going to know if it's a good signing later down the line. We can't say now because we don't really know. It was interesting that Lillo, when asked about Núñez, said of that game against Sporting in 2022, he said what they liked about him was the way that he didn't give up. He guided his team through. They were losing 5-0, but he was like the best player on the pitch and kept on going, and it was the attitude more than his sort of technical ability. So maybe, I mean, if City need that in cup games, I'm thinking last year they lost to Southampton, the sort of second string, and there was no leader on that pitch. Is he going to be someone like that? Maybe those are the games where Rodri isn't playing, De Bruyne isn't playing. You need someone to step up like that. Maybe that's why they've signed him.
I don't feel they get anything wrong either. I think genuinely the past however many transfer windows, I think the only one who hasn't paid dividends so far is Calvin Phillips.
This is it, yeah. And the Akanji example is another one where you kind of got to trust City at the moment. And there was an interesting quote from Cheeky Bagiristan after the Champions League draw, and he said, we are signing these players because we need to refresh the team and keep people on their toes, basically. And it was, so obviously they're going to sign players because they're good players, but it's sort of that acceptance that you need to keep things fresh, and if players leave, you need to keep the competition and keep the players who are here at the top level. And I mean, City they're not keeping it secret that they want to go and retain the Premier League, the Champions League, add to the Carabao Cup and win the Club World Cup as well. So they're going to need a full squad to do that. So maybe they've looked at it in the last couple of days of the transfer window, or the last week or so, and thought, yeah, we need another body in that midfield.
How important do you think it was keeping hold of Kyle Walker and Bernardo in this summer transfer window? It's pretty imperative, wasn't it, I think?
I think that's as important as signing the replacements for the players who've left, because Walker is one of the captains, and especially in De Bruyne's absence, he is the captain now, and he's the highest sort of ranked player in that captaincy group. And yes, he was going to leave, and he spoke to reporters after the Fulham game and gave sort of 15 minutes of his time, which is unheard of in a mix zone. And I don't think I've ever seen Kyle Walker walk through the mix zone at City, so he clearly had something he wanted to say, and he said, yeah, listen, I had an offer from Bayern, and it came down to who gave more years on the contract, but he always wanted to stay at City because they can offer something that no one else does, which is going for all these titles. And I think he said, when you win the treble in that manner, then why would you want to leave? So I don't think he wanted to leave because he wanted to leave City, but he's 32, 33 now, and he wanted just to have as many years left on his contract as possible. So you can understand that, but I think he's going to be really important in that defence. And we were saying when we thought he was going to join Bayern Munich, he offers something on that right side that no one else does, doesn't he? He's got that pace, and this season he's shown it by popping up on the right wing quite a lot and helping that formation. And he can go into a back three if needed. He can be a right winger. He's even started to invert into midfield, which he wasn't doing in sort of the days when João Cancelo was leading the way in that regard. So I think he's as important as any other signing, and likewise Bernardo. You can't replace Bernardo. He does something that, again, no one else can do in that squad. He can play on the right wing, he can play in the centre. He went in sort of defensive midfield against Fulham towards the end. He was at left back last season. He knows Guardiola's system inside out and doesn't need to be told where to be or what to do. So yeah, keeping hold of them two, I think they'd have been bigger losses than Gundogan or Mahrez, for example.
I think those two are almost irreplaceable. Yeah. I think the profiles, Bernardo's so unique. Yeah. I think when we saw him last season pop up at left back at the Emirates in like the most ridiculous, like you think to yourself, this is do or die, City obviously behind points wise and the catching out, and then you see him pop up at left back, then central midfield, then left wing, then right wing, and then I think he was playing false nine at points of that game as well. So that profile is so unique, isn't it? It's almost that free roaming Messi role. And then on top of that, you've got Kyle Walker, who a lot of people always forget. It's like, yeah, he can play right wing. Everyone talks about his athleticism, his physicality, his pace. I know that builds into it, but he's a tremendous defender as well. Yeah. Like he's an unbelievable 1v1 defender, and like as you just said, he can play in a back three, he can play centre back, right wing, right back. He can almost do everything. So I think those two profiles are huge. Whereas Gundogan was obviously a bit of a goal scoring machine, but I think you can get box to box midfielders pretty much anywhere, and that's not dimming down what Gundogan does because it's very unique. But as with Mahrez, we were just talking earlier about Cole Palmer being a very similar profile. If he built, got more experience, it could have been a similar sort of player. But you just feel with Walker and Bernardo, there's no similar players to them whatsoever. I think it'd be really difficult to replace that, wouldn't it?
I think with Walker as well, he's got better as a footballer under Guardiola. So he was just a very good right back, and we knew that. But now he's doing the inverting, he's doing, like you say, he's a very, very good defender, and wingers don't bother attacking him because they know they're not going to win. And he's popping up in attack now, which he never normally did, and he's one way he's got better with age, and City don't normally give out contracts more than a year to players over 30. They didn't do that for Gundogan before it was too late, and everyone was crying out and saying, give Gundogan as many years as he wants, because he carried City over the line in the Premier League last year. But they were a bit reluctant and probably were too late in that. They now look like they're going to give Walker a 2 or 3 year contract till 2026, and that sort of shows just how valuable he is to City.
Well, we'll leave it there. Hope you enjoyed that. It was quite good, that, wasn't it? Guys, we'll be back in Act 2 to discuss the battering of Fulham and a certain individual who's definitely caught our eye. We'll see you in a bit. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Talking City podcast. Before we get into Fulham, well, it's kind of comprised of the Fulham game. I wanted to just touch on Oscar Bobb because he gets me really excited. So interesting how we're just talking about previously about all the players that City had got rid of and sent out on loan. They seemed very, very keen on keeping Oscar Bobb around the place. And for City fans, Joe, maybe a lot of them don't really know about Oscar Bobb. I've watched him for a couple of years now, and he's frighteningly good. And I thought at the weekend there was a little phase of play where he's in the midfield, he took 3 or 4 players on, and you just thought, okay, there's a real player here, real balance. And you mentioned earlier Bernardo Silva being that perfect profile of a Pep Guardiola player. Yeah. Oscar Bobb is exactly that, isn't he, at such a young age?
Yeah, Bernardo's quite a good comparison. We literally said there's no player like Bernardo, but Bobb is that sort of like, he's got the similar centre of gravity, and he's very good with his feet and can just wiggle out of tight situations. And he's won the Academy Player of the Year for 2 years in a row. And we've had players like Palmer, McAtee, Carlos Borges, Divem Abude, all of these players who are scoring goals and making the headlines. Bobb's record is very good, and he's sort of the glue, if you like, at that number 10, keeping them all together and playing them in, or he might be the one playing that sort of pre-assist, if you like, the sending the full back to the byline and then there's the cut back. And it's about time that he's in the first team, I think, because it's another one where it shows that if you perform well in that academy, you will get your chance and you will get noticed. And I mean, City are proud of their academy record, and they've made £100 million from the academy this year, but they don't keep a player if they're not good enough. And they did it with Palmer, and he was good last season, but as we've said, he didn't always take his chance, and now it's Bobb's turn, it seems. I spoke to Brian Barry Murphy, the under-21 manager, just about the season, and they've lost the majority of their goals from last season. The names I mentioned, Borges, Mabude, Bobb, Shea Charles, a lot of experience has gone, but they're not expecting Bobb to come back. I said, if you're playing in the EFL Cup, if you've got any injuries, are you expecting to call upon Oscar Bobb? And he said no. And he said he doesn't think Bobb would want to go anyway, and he said it's probably a bit healthy for the player to completely separate himself from the academy and become a first team player. And we've seen Cole Palmer drop down a couple of times. We've seen Palmer played twice in a day a couple of seasons ago after making a Premier League appearance against Burnley. Then he went and played in the PL2 against Leicester because he wanted to play football. But it sounds like that's not a policy anymore. It didn't happen last season, and it sounds very clearly like Oscar Bobb is a first team player now. And yes, towards the end of the transfer window, they lost Palmer. McAtee persuaded City that he would be better going out on loan, but they've kept Bobb, and it was a good cameo, wasn't it, against Fulham? But if you've watched him, you know that's what he's capable of, and we saw him in pre-season. He's not afraid to take on his men. He's not afraid to put a cross in, and he'll have a shot as well. And I think I'm quite looking forward to seeing what he can do off the bench. And he's got to look at Palmer and think, what did Palmer do well? What did Palmer not do well last season? He's probably got to be a bit more adventurous when he does come on and say, I'm going to make my name here, and I'm going to make Guardiola make a decision of putting me in.
I always think with young players, Pep in particular, you don't expect them to big them up so much. And already you've got Lilo commenting on him post-match in the game, essentially saying that he's such an incredible young talent that he needed to be in the first team, he needs to play. And I remember after the games, the pre-season friendlies as well, the exact same things were being said by Pep Guardiola. We've got so much expectation for him. It's an incredible sort of indictment, isn't it, for him, really?
Yeah, and if we've got all these players moving on and deciding that they want to play elsewhere, I think City are creating a lot of first-team footballers, but there is an acceptance that it's going to be very hard to be a City first-team footballer. And, I mean, Cole Palmer made 40-odd appearances, and he's thought it's time to leave. So it's one thing getting in the team, it's another thing staying there, and then he's got to do the next step. But there's players like Rico Lewis, there's players, Phil Foden's obviously the shining example where it can be done, and Bobb will be hoping to do a little bit more successfully than Cole Palmer.
I don't think we've ever had breaking news on the pod, Joe, but it sounds like Kyle Walker has just signed a new contract, extension till 2026. We were just speaking about him earlier. Vitally important, and we were just giving him glowing plaudits, weren't we? But it's fantastic news on a Monday morning to hear that. I mean, it just seems everything's good at the minute, doesn't it? Everything's free-flowing with City, and this is the cherry on the ice cream of the weekend, really, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, the first story of the summer was Walker is going to join Bayern Munich, and it was dragging on, and then they played Bayern Munich, and he's having jokes with the Bayern players in the tunnel, and all the sort of the press is the German press in particular are making a lot of noises about that. And I think as we touched upon, that's probably going to be one of the most important signings of the summer now for City, and it gives them another couple of years now to find the next right back. We thought it'd be João Cancelo, doesn't look like it now. It could be Rico Lewis. It may be the reason of keeping Walker for so long into his 30s is to give Rico Lewis time to become that sort of number two. He's a different player, but he is a right back, or they want to go to the market and find another one in the future. But if you've got Walker till 36, his body doesn't look like it's going to slow down anytime soon. He's still going to do those bursting runs, when I think it's a great bit of business.
Still reckons he's the quickest, doesn't he? I don't think that's going to... Jeremy Doku been about. I think that's going to be a real contest, isn't it? 5-1 at the weekend. No Jack Grealish, obviously no Kevin De Bruyne. It was the Erling Haaland show, really, wasn't it? Controversial Ake goal, but we'll put that to one side. 3 hat-trick heroes at the weekend. Can you name them?
Son, Ferguson and Haaland.
Well done. Haaland, once again, I mean, I think Lilo said he was just born to score goals, and it's just got to a point now where it's like, you take him for granted, don't you? But it's like what this guy does week in, week out, it's just phenomenal. I mean, you can't say anything more about him, really, can you? It's just one of those where he's done it again.
And I think the 3 very typical Haaland goals, a penalty, we know he scores them. He missed one last weekend. He's hit it as well as he did against Sheffield United, but it's gone in. I think it just shows that the Sheffield United one was a one-off, but the character for him to step up again and he was never missing that penalty, was he? I think Lillo said afterwards he would have taken another one at Sheffield United if it had come along. I mean, the first one, yes, he gets a little bit of luck with a through ball, but he's always there. He's forcing those mistakes, isn't he? And then the finish, never going to miss. And the third one, right in the middle of injury time, Fulham are probably just waiting to get off the pitch, and there's a little look from Sergio Gomez when he gets through. And
fantastic,
very, very good, and he just looks a little bit behind Haaland, and Haaland knows exactly where to be, whether they've worked on that in training, but it's that movement from Haaland to always be alive, and he takes just a couple of steps away from his defender. He comes back to have the shot on goal, and you can't stop him when he's in that mood. And I think it was another game where he didn't do a lot. As we always say this with Haaland, he doesn't do a lot in games.
Is that just a general thing now? Do you think that's just a general thing? It must be, mustn't it? Like, he just doesn't do a lot, but when the chance is there.
Well, his build-up play has got a lot better. He's coming more involved, and I think he's a lot better with Foden and Alvarez behind him. But even on a quiet day, you can't count him off because he's always there.
And he's doing it without Kev as well.
This is it, yeah. I think Kovacic is doing quite well in that role. He did another sort of pre-assist, as we say, to play in Haaland for that for the first one for Alvarez. I'm not sure if it was a shot or a cross, but we'll give him the benefit of the doubt. If him and Alvarez can keep improving that relationship, which was already quite good already, that can be quite dangerous as well. And then Phil Foden in that number 10 role also. So if you've got two good attacking forwards behind Haaland, that just gives the defence another thing to think about, and Haaland will always move until the very last minute. So I think it's a nightmare to defend against City when they're in that mood.
Yeah, because they were always talking, it was always a big thing last year was how do you stop Kevin De Bruyne? Because De Bruyne obviously had that moment of magic where he can just end the game, left foot, right foot, such a pure striker of the ball, but also it was that assist to Haaland, wasn't it? And that was being made a huge thing. But now you're looking at Haaland and there's even more development with him, because it's like, he doesn't need Kevin De Bruyne on the pitch to still produce, and that's massive indictment to him again, isn't it?
I think a lot of it is the formation. I think Foden said he feels alive in that role that he played against Newcastle. He was a bit more wide in this game because Grealish wasn't there and Doku was in the team as well. But if you've got Alvarez playing so close, Alvarez is pulling defenders all over the place as well. If Foden's in there, he's doing exactly the same. It just works well, and it's just, if you've got all of the things happening, all of that movement in that central area, you don't need a spectacular De Bruyne pass, because before long you're going to make those chances. And City weren't great in the first half. They were very lucky to go in ahead. They went ahead and then conceded a minute later, and then a goal that shouldn't have stood went in their favour. It's quite refreshing that everyone's just in agreement with that. Even City fans are just saying, do you know what? We got away with one there. Haaland said the same thing. But they could have, I don't know, Fulham could have come out and used that to galvanise them, but City just came out in that second half. A word from Lillo, a word from Guardiola, it seems, and they came out and they were just ruthless, and that's what City do, and they didn't play that well, it seems, against Fulham. But they won 5-1 in the top of the league, and they've got a perfect start, and that's what champions do, isn't it?
Do you think they've played well this season by City standards? I'm not sure they have.
Probably not, but they rarely do at the start of the season. It's interesting to hear Walker say that he sat his team down and said, let's go and make a good start, because we always make a slow start and then have to catch up, and that's all well and good, but let's go and attack the league this season and make it not a title race. So I think I was watching the Arsenal game, and Declan Rice came out afterwards and said it was a must-win because we would have gone 5 points behind City if they'd lost. Like, even Arsenal know, yes, they're 2 points behind now, but they know that if they slip up, City are just going to win and win and win. So if City aren't playing well and they're still winning, and they've got players to come back, like Grealish wasn't playing, Bernardo's been in and out of the team because he's been ill and now he's had a baby, and they've lost all these key players. De Bruyne can come back. It's pretty dangerous for the rest of the team, and you've got all the new players who will only get better with time.
Yeah, exactly. I think, as we mentioned previously, I thought Doku looked pretty sharp as well, which was good to see. But overall, I think, it's exactly like you've just said. It's this slow start, which City are always pending as having, which is true, let's be honest, it's been true for a number of years now, and Guardiola's alluded to it as well, but the treble win last season was obviously something completely unique, but something that's also unique is a very, very fast Man City start when they're playing in third gear. In my opinion, I don't think they've been able to the third gear or fourth, fifth, where we know they're just unplayable. It's got to be exciting for City fans, hasn't it? Because it's like, where does it? I mean, you're looking at the fixtures even after the break, and you're like, where does this end? And the psychology, like you just said, Joe, is so different now, because it's like City are the ones being hunted, and normally they're the hunters, aren't they, at this stage of the season? Yeah,
and I mean, they've not played at their very best, but they've won the Super Cup. They were a couple of penalty kicks away from winning the Community Shield, and now they've won 4 in a row. And I just think that winning is ingrained in that team now, and they know what to do. And there might have been a little bit of sort of unsureness, or I don't know what the word is. Like I don't know, the fans might not have been completely behind it, because how do you go again after winning the treble?
It's true though, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, Guardiola said it last year, how do you go again after winning 2 in a row? So now, after getting the highest of the highs, how do you just motivate yourself? But I know. Well, I think Phil Foden said that him and Grealish sat down after all the partying died down and said, how do we get back to this feeling? And they decided the quadruple. That's the only way to do it. And Walker's decided that winning the Premier League in a better way than they have done is that way, and that's dangerous, I think, as well. If City are trying to look at ways to get even better than winning the treble.
Yeah, 100%. Guys, we're going to leave it there, and we're going to talk more about this in Act 3. We'll see you in a bit. Hello everybody, welcome back to the Talking City podcast. Let's get back onto what we were just talking about, because it's very exciting. But Man City, obviously, so far, we're in the international break now. We've kind of discussed it a little bit, but that motivation is such an interesting topic, because like you were just saying there, Grealish and Foden almost sat down, and it's like, where do we get better here? And it feels like with Guardiola, the centenary season was obviously like a massive thing, but you could just see that grin on his face when they went down to Southampton, won 1-0 when Jesus scored and all this sort of stuff. But it's that you do feel that he's ingrained in this side, not just titles, but even just point tallies. All these like micro details that we would all probably sit back and go, it doesn't matter, but it matters to this team, doesn't it? And that's ingrained from the top down.
Yeah, and you've got the players who have been there and won it all. The fact that they're wanting to win again. It's not the new players coming in saying, I want to win the Premier League for the first time, or I want to have that feeling that I saw the players celebrating on the treble parade. It's the players like Grealish and Foden and Walker saying, we want to win again and we want to win better. And I think Guardiola had to do a lot last season, in public and in private, to say, you need to keep up that motivation yourself. He did that big rant after the Tottenham game and challenged every single person at the club, from the people above him to the fans to the players to the staff, to demand more, because you need that sort of expectation for City to win and to play at the best of their ability. So the fact that they've now taken that upon themselves, Guardiola's not been there for 2 weeks, and they've won two games that, let's be face it, easy on paper but quite tricky. Bramall Lane was a very sort of fierce atmosphere and wasn't easy for City. Fulham, I don't think any team sort of threatened City and made them struggle as much as Fulham did last season, and they put 5 past them, and yeah, it was a different Fulham side, but it was still one of them that City made real hard work of beating Fulham at the Etihad last season, and now they beat them 5-1. So just those sort of little sort of incremental improvements is, I think, something that City will look at. And then they always say you can't win a league at the start of the year, you can't win a title, but you can set the sort of foundations in place. And I think they'll look at the Champions League draw and they'll be quite happy with the 3 teams they've drawn, and that will give them just a bit more time to sort of reacclimatise to Europe, and they should navigate that fairly quickly. The sort of the new signings can bed in and sort of learn the expectations of what it means to be a City European champion now. And I think it's all sort of fallen into place a bit when maybe a couple of weeks ago we might have been a little bit negative just for that exact same reason. How do you follow a treble winning campaign? Also,
for me, you need, on the pitch, you're going to lose quality. Obviously, you've lost Gundogan, Mahrez, players of that ilk. But also, maybe you need to regenerate the squad in terms of a mentality as well, because if these players have done it before, and don't get me wrong, that step up, the quadruple, is obviously something where it's like, we've not done that yet. No, this points tally, we've not done this yet. We've not, all these like little milestones they can reach. But I think you need a flux of new players to come in to be able to be like, I want to get what they did last season. I want to do that. I want to, I want this amount of assists. I want this amount of goals. And then you also get players like, we've mentioned Julian Alvarez and Phil Foden, who maybe didn't get the minutes that they wanted last season. And now they're thinking to themselves, hold on, I've got a point to prove here. I want to play X amount of games. And they're huge factors in winning the same amount and more.
I think Guardiola said something buried in an answer just before he had his surgery. He said, whatever happens with the transfer window, we'll go with the players who are here and who are happy to be here. And they've got rid of players like Cancelo, Mahrez, Laporte, who weren't playing as much at the end of last season. They weren't in the sort of starting 11s that won the Cup, that won the Champions League. They've gone now because maybe their mentality or their view on things would have been a bit different. And like you say, they've got these players who, all of them have come in and said, we've seen what they did by winning the treble. We want to be part of that, and we want to win as well. So maybe that's part of it as well, that mentality and bringing those players in with that hunger as well.
So if I'm to push you, just to end the pod, what would you give the transfer window out of 10?
I think considering they've lost so many key players and experienced players, to keep the same size of the squad with all the money that's gone involved and not spent that much when you're taking all the incomings, I think it's probably a 7. I don't think it's the best window they've had, because they're not sort of like an Erling Haaland type signing who is going to hit the ground straight away. But you can see Kovacic, as we say, looks like he's been playing for years. Gvardiol looks like he's going to be a mainstay for years to come. Doku and Nunes are interesting, and I think time will tell. But the squad is the same size as it was. There's enough competition in each position, and I think they'll be happy, considering it was maybe a bit more of a reactive window than a proactive one.
Yeah, I'd probably give it maybe a 7.5, only on the basis that you look at Doku and you look at Gvardiol and you think potential. Yeah. Just the potential is just ridiculous, and I can't really, but I'm throwing Oscar Bobb in there as a potential new signing, really. That's the feeling. Just almost the synergy and the cohesion of the group is going to be really interesting. And yeah, it seems like they've done, the balance I think is really good in terms of the loans that have gone out, and the money they've made through the academy is second to none, really, isn't it? Yeah. But guys, I hope you enjoyed that. A little bit of a synopsis on the transfer window, and the season so far been pretty decent. One City absolutely flying. We're going to be back after the international break with more and more pods. But before that, on Friday, we do have a podcast. So do make sure that you're checking for that one. It's going to be me and Simon. So you've been replaced for this one. Apologies.
Benched.
Yeah, benched. But guys, thank you so much. Make sure you're checking out the Manchester Evening News consistently. We're across all socials. Leave us a 5-star rating if you would on Apple, Spotify, any of your favourite podcast providers. Make sure if you're watching us in visual colour, shout out to you, Dan Murphy, make sure that you're liking, commenting and subscribing, and we'll see you in a bit. Cheers.